When using the new DarkFire plugin of United Plugins, my reaction of "oh, another saturation plugin" changed to "oh, this is actually an interesting beast." DarkFire does something which you don't see in plugins that much. It separates the harmonics and saturation for the original signal and applies all of its processing to these harmonics only before blending the original and the harmonics back together. This can easily result in just a louder sound, but fortunately this plugin has taken precautions to counter that in two ways. The first is that the input drive does not increase overall level by much. It was under a decibel with all audio I tested. The second thing is that the plugin has an auto gain compensation mode, and I suggest you always leave it on with normal use. The reason for that is because with it enabled, the entire plugin sort of auto mixes itself, where you have a balance between processed harmonics and the original clean signal. DarkFire is not the most intuitive plugin. It took me a few spins to really understand how it all works. So everything you do works on these added harmonics only. That means that if you have the harmonics dial down, you can turn as much as you want with the other dials, but nothing will happen. The way how I work with this plugin is to start dialing in the input drive until I start to hear some saturation happening and then back off a bit. With the automatic gain compensation on, the harmonics dial will then work as a sort of dry-wet mix balance control. And you will be working this control and the input drive a lot. When you enable advanced, you can switch between tape and tube saturation, and they do sound different. Tape is third harmonics only, but extends higher. It can sound more aggressive. Tube has plenty of second and third order harmonics, but falls off earlier. This gives a more warm sound. But there are more differences between these two. One thing is that gain staging is an important thing, because when you have selected tape, the harmonics only seem to kick in the plugin after it crosses the -11 decibel level internally. You can see it really turning on after you pass a certain threshold. Below this threshold with tape, the plugin won't work at all. When you dive in, the 3 frequency band controls is where things start to get even more interesting. With these you can change the amount of the harmonics around the frequency area selected. Flexible harmonics sculpting options, where you can focus more on high saturation, or mids, or the lows. Let's go over a few scenarios. If you turn down mid and high and only boost low end, you can use DarkFire as a low end enhancer in the same way as, for instance, with Waves R-Bass. You increase harmonics for the low end, meaning this low end will be better audible on smaller speakers. The mid control can round and smoothen sound in a nice way. Check this synth. Of course, there will be a difference because the low and high frequency balance gets reduced as well, but you can really hear the softening. The high can be used for anything which needs high-end lift and at the same time some softening. Let's use it on this next vocal.
You love, you just wanna hide, don't wanna be. You love, takes all of my time, takes up all my time.
Now you can easily overdo the amount of drive in this plugin. And I find that the overdrive on some sources doesn't sound that great. It tends to bark, as you can hear here. But when dialed in properly in combination with the harmonics control, you can lift audio with a sound that is different than an EQ. Let me show you with the same acoustic guitar. On this snippet I let FabFilter Pro Q4 do an EQ match. This is the difference in sound. It is subtle with these settings. The DarkFire version sounds more even and smoother and even a bit richer than the EQ matched version, which makes sense, that is the saturation doing its thing. The acoustic guitar sounds already more polished and mixed. From here you should absolutely add things like a regular EQ, but your bass's sound will already have improved a lot thanks to this saturation. And as a contrast, this plugin is also able to add a lot of punch to, for instance, drums with just the harmonics amount. Before we dive in the effects of this plugin, please make sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already and hit that like button. This video is sponsored by DistroKid, the best way to get your music onto popular streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music. You'll keep 100% of the royalties you earn from your streams and get unlimited, yes, unlimited uploads. Use the link in the description of this video to get 7% off of your first year on DistroKid and see for yourself why so many artists are using DistroKid to distribute their music. DarkFire does have a couple of effects which does feel a bit out of place for a saturation plugin, but they are actually useful. Again, these effects only apply to the harmonics of this plugin. There's a compressor and you can choose between VCA and FET style compression. Depth is a sort of reverb, but it's based on short delays. This can work well with more sustained sounds. On short transients you can really hear these delays. The coolest effect is the stereo widening. And this is not a mid-sides based trick. Instead, it uses the old trick where you use a lot of frequency cuts on one band and boost it on the other, and vice versa. So one channel will have cut, boost, and so on, and the other the exact opposite. It sounds like this. In the advanced mode you can also have this more focused on the higher frequencies. The biggest advantage of this method is that it is absolutely mono-compatible. But it does affect the sound a bit, but it is a little hidden gem in this plugin. I wouldn't mind seeing this stereo widening as a separate plugin. Modulation is of course modulation, and this can work in either a slower or faster mode. DarkFire is not the easiest plugin to work with, simply because it takes some getting used to the concept of only working with the harmonics. But it can be worthwhile to dive in deep and tweak around, because it can enhance your audio in a good way, especially at its intro price of $15. Check it out to see if it fits in your audio toolshed.